The afternoon session is home-educated graduates in their own words. Sort of like there's a lot of different ways to homeschool kids. There's a lot of different ways to make a cake. So you throw everything in there, you stir it up, and you put it in the oven, and you see what comes out, what kind of cake. Well, here we are. We got 6 cakes over here from a bunch of different ways that the kids have been homeschooled. So I'm Bruce West. I'm from the United States. I'll be your moderator today. Each presenter is going to have 9 minutes to present what they have to say. And then after that, we will do a Q&A session, and we'll just have whoever has any questions come down to this mic down here, and I'll talk about it again once we get done. So our speakers are from your left to my right, or to my side, Anne Charles from the UK, Thomas Curto from Italy, Stephanie Lambert from the US, Simon Noster from Canada, Heather Schuaer from Turkey, and Reham Zia from United Arab Emirates. So with that, go ahead, Anne, you have the floor.
Hello, hi. So yes, I'm Anne from the UK. Nice to see you all. I hope everyone isn't going to slump too much in the post-lunch area. So I'm going to do a little bit about my home-ed life and then a bit about my career, because I've been told everyone wants to be reassured that we're vaguely functioning adults. It depends on the day, really, about the functioning part. So I've never been to school. I'm from the UK. I'm now 40 years old, and I've calculated that I have been asked a question about my social life approximately 7,422 times, which is a lot less than it feels, because it feels like it's about 7 billion, but yeah, on average once a day, every day for most of my childhood. So I grew up in Norfolk, which is a semi-rural part of the UK, and we were home educated from the beginning. My mum sort of thought she was inventing it. My sister and I are 18 months apart, and my mum was interested in education. Both of my parents were teachers, which isn't helpful in any way for home education, but they were kind of interested in education. And I was 5. I was born in September, so yeah, they were teachers. The fact I was born in September wasn't an accident. So the problem was that I would have been, in those days you went to school when you were 5, and I would have been a very old 5-year-old at school. And my mum looked around the local schools when I was 2.5 or 3, and the local school had the red table and the blue table and the green table. And she thought, well, most 2.5, 3-year-olds can do red, blue and green. And by the time she's 5, she's going to be beyond that. And she didn't want my sister to miss out on all the things like story time at the library, because she was going to have to rush back and pick me up. So she thought, well, in Scandinavia, children don't go to school until they're 7. We're perfectly happy as we are. We'll just carry on like that for a bit. And then a few weeks later, she found out that other people did this too, and home education was a thing. So her idea was that we would be home educated until we were 7. And then we got to 7, and it was like, oh, should we do another year? Yeah, okay. Shall we do another year? And then by that point, you're really into it. And yeah, I've never been to school. My sister did choose to go to school for 6th form. That's like 16 to 18, but I've never been. And we were never known to our local authority. And I'm very glad we were never known to our local authority, because having that external interference wouldn't have helped in any way. So it did mean we were able to follow our interests. We followed kind of a semi-structured style when we were younger, and then a more self-directed style when we were older. But we weren't really putting philosophy, we weren't taking someone else's philosophy on top of it. We were just living our life and getting on with things and doing what we thought was right at the time. And that I think is the easiest way of doing stuff. So that's my home ed stuff. And then what I'm doing now, I am a broadcast consultant. I work in radio. I work in radio technology mainly nowadays all over the world. I'm very lucky. I also have a side gig as a baby wearing consultant, because why not? I get to help out at my local sling library once a month, which is really fun, gives me a break from the laptop. And I also do quite a lot of informal home ed support, and I'm involved in setting up some home education organisations, because it's nice to keep your hand into the community as well. So my career stuff, I started out as a radio and online producer. And then I became a broadcast engineer, which is quite a home educating move because that's quite a weird move for people to do. Lots of people say, well, that doesn't make much sense. But to me, it does make sense because both those jobs are about being curious and asking questions all the time. So I kind of joke that my career now is like mainly occupying the brown splodgy bit in the middle, and that's where I spend most of my days, translating between producers and technical folk and vice versa. So I spent 12 years at the BBC, worked in local and regional radio and television, and then I went to do network radio. I was a children's radio specialist for a while, then I worked for the BBC World Service, and then I was really interested in the technology side as well, because when you're on your own in a local radio station at 12 o'clock at night, and something goes wrong and the only person who can mend it is you, and you're in control of half the country's radio output, and you might have help from someone on the phone and 200 miles away, but it is in your interest to learn how to mend things. So I got a development attachment at the BBC to spend some time with the broadcast engineers, and from then I ended up working on some big projects. So I don't know if anyone's staying at Salford Quays or has gone to the Imperial War Museum, but the BBC has a massive building in Manchester, and I was involved in making that building happen alongside the BBC's headquarters in London. So if you hear any pre-recorded output on a BBC radio station, it's come from a system I've worked on. I then left the BBC because working on the two largest projects the BBC has ever done at the same time was quite tiring. And so I left and escaped and went all the way to New Zealand and ended up teaching journalism. So that's some of my colleagues and students on the steps of Parliament in Wellington. And then for various reasons, I ended up working in and out of South Sudan, training broadcast engineers and producers there, and also co-authoring a report on solar-powered transmission. And I now run Radio TechCon, which is the UK radio and audio industry's technical and engineering event. So if you love broadcast engineering and you're in London in November, do come along. And I'm a specialist in object-based media. So normally when I speak at conferences, the last two conferences I spoke at were in Amsterdam and then in Germany, talking about object-based media, which is the future of how we're going to make and consume radio, TV, audio, film, podcasts. I've got a massive presentation on that if anyone wants to see it. It's got cake in it. It's brilliant. And I'm setting up an international standards body to coordinate object-based media standards because, as my colleague said, nobody else would be daft enough to do that. So I was like, well, there's a problem. It needs solving. We need to coordinate these standards. No one else is going to do it. Let's have a go. How hard can it be? I mean, quite hard, but someone's got to do it. So I'm very, very lucky. I get to travel all over the world. I've done live support for like the Radio 1 breakfast show on various systems. Last 2 weeks ago, I was in Botswana, working with Radio Botswana. In case it all sounds very glamorous, I get to judge industry awards and drunk the bar dry in Australia when we were told we had to drink all the champagne because it was a tax thing, something. Seeing the sunrise over the Nile, so it sounds very, very glamorous, but also I did have to have a bucket shower in South Sudan where various insects were landing on my bum and I wasn't quite sure if they were the ones that would dissolve into acid and give you third-degree burns. So, you take the rough with the smooth. So, yes, that's my kind of career. Home education-wise, I'm involved in setting up 2 organisations that support home educators, looking at training local authority and social services professionals in the law around home education, and also raising funds so that we can support home educating families who are in need of financial help with legal fees. But I'll talk about that later on today. And then in terms of the lessons and the things you might want to know, I'll skip over those because I think it's probably what the parents should know thing that you're most interested in. So my mum said the best advice she had was take 1 year at a time. I think the only thing you really need to teach your child is how to look things up and evaluate sources, because if you know how to look things up, you can find out anything in the whole world. The other thing I tend to say to people is support your child and then get out of their way. So, you don't need to interfere in everything they're doing, just kind of set them off and then leave them to it and they'll be fine. Home education is parenting to me, that it's living your life. It doesn't have to be, you can make it really complicated if you want to, but who's got time for that? Just, live your life. So don't overthink it. And really do listen to currently home educated people, because it's all very nice to talk to old, ancient people like me, but listening to children who are currently home educated is probably more useful. Please be involved in fighting for the future. If you have ever been part, we're a minority group, right? So we know what it feels like to be oppressed and to be left out. And I know oppressed sounds like a strong word, but that is what's happening to a lot of us around the world. But also make sure that you're taking that fight and you understand that that fight exists for other minority groups as well. There's no place in home education organisations or groups for transphobia, for being, anti-gay people, for being racist, for being anti-Semitic, anything like that, because hatred has patterns and the things that we experience are experienced by others as well. So let's fight for everybody. And lastly, home education works. And I know we can sometimes talk about depressing things like governments trying to take over from us and really scary stuff, but the word I associate most with home education is joy. So please continue to spread joy in your lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Thomas, I'm 19 years old, and my path has been profoundly shaped by home education. Today, I want to share how this unique approach has influenced my life in ways that traditional schooling might not have. John Dewey, I forgot the beeper. Thank you very much. Great. John Dewey said, "Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself." Growing up as the eldest of 5 siblings, I can say with certainty that home education brought us closer together. We supported each other, celebrated successes, and tackled challenges as a unit, as we still do to this day. Unlike traditional schooling, which might have pulled us in different directions, home education kept us united and teaching us teamwork, empathy, and resilience. Balancing different learning styles and needs could be tough, but those moments only strengthened our bond and our ability to solve problems together. Being 10 years older than my youngest sister, I had the unique opportunity to truly know her and share in her growth. The things we did together would have been highly unlikely had I been enrolled in mainstream school. Home education allowed us to form a deep connection that I cherish every day. Many say that education is the key to unlocking the world, a passport to freedom. I believe it really depends on what kind of education we're talking about, since some forms of education seem to keep kids locked up in 4 walls. On the contrary, at 11, I had the incredible opportunity of attending the prestigious La Scala Ballet Theatre School. La Scala is one of the most well-respected ballet academies in the world, which counts internationally acclaimed dancers such as Roberto Bolle and Carla Fracci among its ranks. This was a dream come true and a significant challenge. Traditional schooling would have posed significant scheduling conflicts, but home education provided the flexibility necessary to excel in both areas. There were days which I found quite tough and moments of exhaustion, but during those times it was my family that provided the unwavering support that I needed to pull through. In that context, I was close to other kids who went to regular school and attended the academy. I had many fears about being the only home-educated child and faced bullying for it. However, these experiences made me stronger because of the support and the closeness that my family offered. I also saw how my peers struggled with their academics despite attending regular schools, which was an eye-opener for me on more levels than one. One of my favorite authors, Mark Twain, stated that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. One of the greatest gifts of home education was the freedom to explore the world. I traveled extensively to the sunny beaches of California, to the vibrant streets of Mexico and Costa Rica, and the historic landscapes of Europe. These experiences were eye-opening. Living in different countries, adapting to new cultures, and meeting diverse people taught me more than any textbook could. These travels expanded my horizons, teaching me adaptability, curiosity, and appreciation for diversity. Money was sometimes a problem, but the freedom to travel in low season and the habit of thinking outside the box made it possible to explore many countries. As a kid, I didn't fully appreciate or understand the importance of this, but my parents' trust and guidance made all the difference. Now I can see where they were coming from, and I've learned so much from all of these experiences. Education is not the filling of the pail, but the lighting of a fire. I've heard many versions of this quote by William Butler Yeats, and I bet you guys all have too, since it's so true. My passion for breakdancing led me to compete in the 2018 Battle of the Year competition held in Montpellier, France. My crew, B-Boy chapters, represented Italy in the under-18 division. The flexibility of home education allowed me to immerse myself in breakdancing, balancing practice, travel, and academics. Competing at a high level required discipline and perseverance, qualities that have shaped who I am today. Teamwork was crucial in our success in breakdance, challenging the common idea that home-educated kids aren't socialized. I believe we get to choose our friends and build meaningful relationships based on shared passions and goals. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, Nelson Mandela said. The fact is, how do we want to change the world? For the better or the worse? It really depends on the kind of education, right? One of the most remarkable aspects of my journey is my transition to university. Instead of following the traditional path, I tailored my education to suit my strengths and aspirations. I prepared for and took 3 advanced placement exams in mathematics, physics, and statistics, subjects I intended to study at university. I also took 2 A-levels, but that's a different story. This approach was less time-consuming than the traditional Italian high school path and allowed me to focus on my interests. Navigating the university application process without traditional markers was challenging, but we made it, and I'm now studying mathematical engineering at the Politecnico di Milano. I was happy and excited to start university, but I soon realized that many professors lacked charisma and enthusiasm. I found that I could study more effectively on my own, having worked independently for so long, using my time better. This allowed me to work while studying. In this way, I've been able to work while I study as a tutor of math and English. And as the eldest of my siblings, I signed as co-founder of Libera Scuola, the Italian foundation for the protection and support of home educating families in Italy. I really hope my experience demonstrated the power of home education. It fostered unity, allowed for excellence, broadened my horizons through discovery, supported my passion, and offered an innovative approach to higher education. To the parents of teens and teens themselves, I say, embrace the freedom and the possibilities that home education offers. Trust in the journey, support each other, and pursue your passions without fear. Together, we can shape a future where education is not confined by traditional boundaries and family unity is paramount. Thank you.
Hello, I am Stephanie Lambert, and I was home educated in the United States of America, in the state of Texas, before home educating was officially recognized to be legal. Today, I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization that serves the families of over 750,000 home educated students in the state of Texas. And thanks to the pioneers of the home educating movement in the United States of America and across the world, I have benefited. And I now am able to dedicate my life to serving families, to protecting our organization's mission, and my personal mission is to protect families, to advocate for them, and to support them in their home education journey. We do that by working in the courts. We do that by working in the legislature, and we do that by working with government agencies, as well as hosting conferences. My parents heard a radio program called Focus on the Family back in the 1980s. And when my dad heard Dr. Raymond Moore interviewed, he came home and told my mom, "Honey, I think we need to homeschool." And she replied, "We?" That was the beginning of my parents deciding to home educate their 4 children. I shared earlier that our home education looked one way initially. We had desks that had a built-in table and then a built-in spot underneath for all of our books, and that's where we would go every morning into our schoolroom. And then as we got more comfortable and really depending on the stage of our life, we ended up schooling at the kitchen table or schooling in the living room. And ultimately, we would school wherever we went. My mom would take us along to the grocery store, take us along to the bank, take us along to the post office, and our education really extended into every part of our lives. Early in my life, like you said, Anne, my parents taught me to walk and to talk, and home educating was just an extension of early development and parenting. My parents were focused on our development as we were young, and they just began to focus more on academics as we got older. As we grew, and there were few people home educating in those days, they needed books and curriculum, so they actually collaborated with and coordinated with private school curriculum providers. And that's how they got curriculum to use to teach us. They also used the libraries. They would go and find books about the topics that they wanted to teach us about. They also coordinated with other families, the few other families in our area who were homeschooling themselves. And we had classes together. My parents started the first local home education organization in our town. And eventually they started our statewide home education organization. And that was founded to actually help communicate to families like ours who were also home educating as the government was determining whether this was something that would be legalized. We went to something we called the Austin Tea Party when the government was actually meeting to discuss the legalities of homeschooling, and 6,000 people from around the entire state back in the 1980s surprised the government by showing up to voice their support for home educating. So since that time, my father is the president of the organization, and I have come alongside to help serve as the executive director. My parents not only focus on academics, but they also recognize the value and the importance of character. And so home educating, we call it homeschooling in the States, home educating gave my parents the opportunity to create the environment for us to learn character in various ways. I remember gardening, I remember visiting the elderly, I remember serving in our church. My parents were very active in the community. So I remember opportunities like block walking, where we would help educate the community about various initiatives. My parents took us alongside them to do what they did, and that was an extension of our home education. Because of the determination of my parents and other pioneers of the homeschool movement, I am the beneficiary, and I am blessed and privileged to have served in our governor's campaign as staff. At the age of 21, I was planning events and fundraisers and conferences for upwards of 3,000 people. I have helped fundraise and raise awareness for important issues that I valued. I have helped pass important and key legislations for families in the state of Texas. And for the last 7 years, I've been privileged to serve as the executive director of an organization that protects and defends and supports home educating and also families in general. My siblings are thriving as well. I have 2 brothers. Both of them own and run their own companies. One is a commercial construction company. Another is a company who supports cotton gins with software. My sister worked in the Texas Education Agency, and now she home educates her own 3 children. And all of us love to participate and be involved in our communities. All of us love each other, and we love our family. And all of us love to learn to this day. Home education gave us the gift of confidence. We're not afraid to be different because we actually grew up doing something very different. Home education made us learners, and home education allowed us, by the grace of God, to be difference makers. I received a very specialized and individualized education, and I'm very, very grateful for it. I hope that one day I'll be able to give the same gift to my own children. Thank you.
Hello, and good afternoon. My name is Simon Noster, and I am from Canada, and I'm happy to talk to you about my home education journey today. I want to talk about 3 key elements that I think were central to my own home education that helped me through my 12 years of home ed, my post-secondary, and in my career today supporting home education for over 5,600 homeschoolers in Alberta. The 3 elements that I can tie my education to are purpose, the importance and value of what you learn and do, critical thinking, being observant, questioning, analyzing, discussing, being okay with being nonconformist, and the third thing is being exposed to great things, great people, great relationships, great literature, great music, great art, and the exposure to experiences because of the freedom inherent in home education. Gerald yesterday referred to, he said, when you're thinking about home educating your children, you're actually home educating the parents of your grandchildren. And I was thinking that 2-generation thing, I wanted to look back to maybe where it all started for me and just a little bit about my grandparents. I had one grandfather who was born on the prairies in a dugout, the son of an immigrant who was homesteading. His father, my great-grandfather, died when my grandfather was 12, and he had to drop out of school and run the farm and help provide for his family. But he refused to be disadvantaged, and he called himself the first homeschooler. He studied whatever he needed to know in order to be successful. He ended up being the first person to have a combine in our area, a combine harvester. He bought it from a catalog. It arrived in a crate with an instruction manual, and the dealer said, good luck. And he figured it out. He was the first one to have electricity in the area. He wired his house, he figured it out from a book, and then wired his neighbors' houses, and he was very proud. None of them burnt down. And he ended up being part of the board that brought electricity to the area. So when it came time for his children to consider home education, my grandpa was all on board. He was the sort of guy who said, walk with a purpose, be observant, and don't be held back. My other grandfather was born in the Soviet Union. He was Volgodeutsch, a German living in Russia. He was conscripted into the Russian army during the war, survived POW camp, escaped into West Germany, and came to Canada. He was a man who did not trust the system to take care of him or know his best interests. He survived because he was very critical in his thinking. He was a guy who left his tank in his car half full for his whole life. But when it came time to home educate, he was very supportive, and my parents were in the right place because they were in a place where they said, you know what, sometimes we have to think for ourselves and not just take what's handed to us by the government or the powers that be, because it may not be in our best interest. So when it came down to my own education, these elements were very, very central to the way we approach things and the confidence that we had. The third thing is, so I suppose the first thing was the importance for the learning, and my grandpa who figured out the combine. The second thing was being very critical thinking with my grandfather, who survived oppression and didn't trust the government and was able to chart his own path forward. But the third thing was the freedom to enjoy the good things. My parents both enjoyed a life where they could enjoy good art and good theater and good literature. And so this is a thing that was very important. So in my own education, growing up on a farm, they said, okay, we're not going to do any of the Cliff Notes versions of things, none of this child talk stuff, none of these prepackaged little information nuggets. We're going to go straight to the real thing, because why not? We have the freedom to do that. We learn through experience. I traveled with my father in his work. I was involved in the farm and given responsibility and purpose. There was, when you have the responsibility of operating a big piece of equipment or feeding animals whose lives depend on your responsibility at a young age, that tells you what you do matters and is important, and you take it seriously. And that had a lasting impact on my life. I developed a can-do attitude. If someone else can do it, why can't I? What can it hurt if I try? If someone else can't do it, well, maybe I can. Maybe I can do something that someone else cannot do. I took ownership of my education in high school years, got together with friends, desiring to read books, drink tea, and discuss things. We called ourselves the Inklings, or the Twinklings, after the Inklings with Lewis and Tolkien. That led us to pursue post-secondary at Thomas Aquinas College, me and a few of my best friends, where we had a classical education studying the original texts, those beautiful things, taking ownership of our lives. So after graduating my high school, before I went to my post-secondary, I decided, I need to make some money, so I bought a little fixer-upper house in a small town and figured out how to redo the plumbing and the wiring and then have a little rental income to get me through college. And I made a 10-year plan. I said, I want to come back and help other people enjoy home education, enjoy this thing that I was benefited by. And so I created a 10-year plan, and I set out to accomplish it, and go figure, 10 years later, I had. So I attended a 4-year program in California, studying the great books, enjoying philosophy and theology. I got involved in all the things. I was in all 4 choirs on the campus. I was in musicals and Shakespeare, did hiking, camping, and surfing, and I met my wife. After graduating, we were married, and we decided, well, I had built a gap year into my 10-year plan. So we spent 3 months backpacking in Europe to be exposed to more beautiful things and build relationship and learn from the history book of Europe. After coming back to Canada, I attended Concordia University and achieved my Bachelor of Education, graduating summa cum laude. I taught in the public system for a couple of years because I wanted to see what it was like on that side and earn a permanent certificate. After that, I worked in home education, the culmination of my 10-year plan. In Alberta, we have to have notification to a school to homeschool. We have to notify our intent and be supervised by an authority, and a teacher visits twice a year to evaluate the progress and achievement of the students. Well, my father started a program after beginning to homeschool us where all of the teachers were actually homeschooling parents as well. So that was part of the legacy, and I stepped into that as a young teacher and became a facilitator working alongside parents to help them develop programs and encourage them in their home education journey. I've since become the principal of home ed for our organization, and I oversee 60 staff supporting about 5,650 students across our province, encouraging them to consider these same principles of recognizing the importance of everything they do and learn, of being a critical thinker, and of embracing the freedom to enjoy beautiful, great things, and not just the prepackaged thing that is supplied to the masses. I am now a proud father of 4. We homeschool ourselves. I've continued keeping my love of learning alive. I run an organic farm with my wife and family with about 1,000 acres of crop and 100 cows. We also enjoy great outdoor activities as a family. I'm a volunteer who's active in working with the government to ensure that our rights of home education are protected. I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I just didn't have enough, so I just became a pilot this year because I had to keep on learning. Anyway, if you can take one thing back, it is do not be limited, enjoy the freedom that home ed provides you, think critically, and it all matters. Thank you.
Is anybody in here have a really hard time giving directions? Anybody? Is it just me? I have a really terrible time giving directions. And that is because I have struggled with a little bit of dyslexia since I was little. And as a native English speaker, one of the tips my parents gave me was just hold out your left hand. It makes an L. But that really does not help. As a dyslexic person, everything makes an L. It doesn't matter what hand I do it with, it always makes an L. And so giving directions it's really hard. And my husband and I, to this day, continue to laugh at this because where we live, drivers normally sit on the left-hand side of the car and passengers on the right. And I have my Google Maps phone, and I'm trying to tell him that he needs to go left. And I'm tapping on my window and telling him he needs to go left. And inevitably, the car is going this direction. And he's like, I am going left. And most of the time, we end up laughing about it. Sometimes it's high stress, so we don't laugh about it till like 2 days later. But I share this because as a small child, I'm sure that my parents had a measure of success of me learning the difference between my right and my left. But here I am, 38 years old, and I still consistently confuse my left and my right. And so I just want you to take a minute and close your eyes and imagine your child or your children and see their faces and just think about who they are. And think about who are they going to be when they're 40 years old? And what is our actual measure of success? How do we define success? So you can open your eyes now. I am a home-educated high school graduate, and I went to university, and I remember stumbling through the walls of the university because I had never been to school, really excited and really nervous. And I called my sister, my older sister, after my first day of school, and I said, guess what? I can bring snacks to school. I can bring snacks to class. And she was like, okay, that is the weirdest observation ever. And in my little homeschool brain, I had thought that all other students were in prison, really, and that they never got to eat whenever they wanted because we got to go to school in our pajamas and we got to eat lunch while we were doing our math and we got to go to the pantry whenever we wanted to. And so I stumbled into university and realized that I also could continue to eat whenever I wanted to. But truthfully, I loved university. It was amazing. I showed up to class, I did the work, and I got a grade. And I loved getting grades. They were amazing because as a homeschooler, my parents were harsh graders. They had high expectations, but the truth is they never gave me a grade. Ever. They never, look, she's dying over there. She's melting in her chair because it's true. She never gave me a grade. If I wrote a paper, we recorrected and we rewrote it, and then we recorrected again, and then we rewrote it because there was always something that we could do better. We could always make it better. And it didn't matter what subject it was. So I showed up at university really having no idea where I was going to fit in the grand scheme of things. And it turns out I was above average. I graduated summa cum laude, but I loved grades. They were so amazing. But the truth is that real life is not as cut and dry as university. I would love it if we got to show up and do the work and get a grade. And maybe in some jobs that's true. In my experience in life, that's not true. Life is far, far more complicated. And so how do we measure success? What does that actually look like? Sometimes maybe it's your job, maybe it's your salary. But for me, or your kids, or the person that you marry, or the place that you live. But for me, when I ask that question of myself and of my kids, what I'm really asking is, how do I live? How do I show up in life? That's the measure of success. And 10 and a half years ago, my husband and I moved to Turkey with our 9-month-old child and found out shortly after that I was pregnant with twins. And the doctor let us know that one of our twins had a congenital heart defect, hypoplastic right heart syndrome. And my girls were born, and we got to take one of our sweet girls home with us. And one of them went straight to the NICU. And she had open heart surgery, and she had a variety of other interventions. And at 2 months and 1 day, she passed away. And the months leading up to their birth and the years following our little girl's death were the hardest that we have endured as a family. More than my homeschool life, more than university, more than career, more than moving my family halfway across the world and learning a new culture, losing my daughter was the thing that carved my character and still to this day defines me. And so I asked the question, how do we define success? I have 4 siblings who were also homeschooled. And to this day, each one of them has endured something that is heavy and difficult. They've walked through something hard. Because the truth is that the world is heavy and difficult. So I want you to close your eyes again, and I want you to imagine once again the faces of your children or your child. Because undoubtedly, each one of those faces is going to walk through something achingly painful. They are going to walk through something that is bring them to their knees in tears difficult. And at that moment, what does success look like? So you can open your eyes. But the question that I like to ask myself is, how do we teach our kids to endure? How do we teach them to be resilient? How do we help them and equip them? Because this world is heavy and difficult. So what does success look like? More than what we know, more than how we were educated, more than what we're good at or what we're bad at. How do we show up in life? And my oldest son is 11, and he's the oldest of 4. And we just started homeschooling last year because we live in Turkey. And so my 3 younger ones still go to Turkish private school because I wanted them to understand culture. I wanted them to understand the Turkish language and be at home in the city that we live in. And as an American, I was not able to give that to them. But homeschooling was always an option. And so last year, my husband and I were looking at our son, and we were noticing that there was just things going on in his life that how he showed up in family, how he showed up with friends wasn't who we wanted him to be. And so we talked to him, and he said, yeah, I want to be homeschooled. And so we started. And it's only been a year, but we've seen improvements. He has more self-awareness. He's ready to say he's sorry when he's done something wrong. He volunteers to help when we don't ask him to help. And I will say he is not perfect. He is 11 years old, and he is the oldest, and he wants everybody to know it, and he drives his siblings crazy. So he's not perfect. But we have seen this improvement of character. And for us, that answers the question, how do we define success? So I want to end on a more light note. My third-born, Reuben, all of my other children were potty trained when they were 2 or 2.5. Reuben was 3, 3.5, going on 4, and this child did not want to potty train. And I was so frustrated and at the end of my rope and didn't know what to do. But the truth is, now he's 8 years old and he's potty trained. Look at that. And the truth is that him potty training later did not define who he is. It doesn't define him now as an 8-year-old. It's not going to define him when he's 20. And the truth is, me not knowing my left from my right is really annoying sometimes. My husband will attest to that. But it's a joke now, and I've learned to deal with it, and it's fine. It doesn't define me as a person. So I just leave you with the question, how do we define success? And for our family, our question, when we ask ourselves that question, is how do we as adults show up in this life? But how do we want our kids to show up in this life? And who do we want them to be when they're 25, when they're 40, and beyond? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reham. I've heard many versions of this name today and the past couple of days, so no worries. If you can come up with a nickname, that'll be great. So a bit about me. I have been born and raised in the UAE. I'm originally from Pakistan. And my home education journey started when I was in middle school. So I've I've grown so much since then. I've also finished my bachelor's degree in environmental science, and I'm looking forward to doing my master's soon. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you today, and the main reason for why I'm here, is to really touch on the journey, the good, bad, and ugly of things, and also kind of like the outcome, but also present day. So it's really just a collection of things from the beginning of time. So here we go. This is the beginning. I was around 8, I would say, and please don't read the poem that I wrote about homeschooling. And my mom decided to take us out of school, my brother and I, and we didn't understand it at first. And then I was like, wow, like I'm actually doing a pretty good job. Anyway, the girl here is shy, reserved, very, 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 just not something holding me down. I felt like there was an anchor holding me from doing things that I could do. I was never told at this this age that I could do things, and I was always told that, oh, you're the quiet one, all throughout school. And that's not what any child wants to hear, that you're just quiet, you're just always in the corner, we don't hear from you, so it's okay, you're not troubling us, so we'll just leave you be. And one thing I wanted to share with you is that in school, they give you so you get a report card. Everyone knows the report card. And they would give you rankings in your class. So whoever was in the same grade gets a ranking, and they would display that paper in the front of the school to show everybody else who walks in that which child is in what ranking, which is crazy to me to think that that would happen to a child. And I would, every time school would finish and we're in the last couple of weeks, I would go to check and like, where's my name on the ranking? So who did the best, basically? And I was always 83rd or, in that range. And I would go there so defeated, and to think that that was me. And I was told that that's it. You're an average student, you're average. I was never told that I was smart or intelligent. And everyone's smart and intelligent. Just because you don't know how to do math or you're not great at the subject does not mean that you're just not a smart kid. This middle picture is one of my first field trips during homeschooling, during my home education journey, and it was such a great day. I'm holding a falcon, I think, and I couldn't believe that a field trip that's not a mall could exist. And in school, they would take us out to the zoo just to say that they did something different, and all they did was just dump the kids to look around the zoo and then come back home. So really no educational learning journey at all. So this is me. Shy, reserved, quiet, didn't know how to dream, wouldn't dare to even think beyond the limits. And people around me at this time always focused on where the limit was and not what I could do beyond it. And here is the path forward. I call it the path forward because it's a continuation. And this is the culmination of my high school, my university journey, graduation, everything until now. And I'm holding a microphone in many of these pictures. The girl you just saw before would never even dream to come close to a stage, let alone hold a mic and talk to people. I was really, making this presentation, I was like, wow, I did that. And your kids, you can do that too. Just the time that I was given by my family that, oh, you can do this, and oh, you like this, let's do more of it. Oh, you can't do this, we'll take a step back. It's okay, you don't need to worry about that so much. And I dared to dream, and this is where it led me. The very important thing that is part of this process is the learning. So I want to focus on that and not just the glamour and the pictures. I wanted to talk about that home education journey is not linear. So it's going to look different. It's going to have little patches, and it's going to be unique. And that's the beauty of it. We measure everyone's lives in high school by saying, oh, you're going to do X, Y, Z to get to this stage. Whereas everyone else in life leads a journey. Every human being has a unique life ahead of them. Everyone gets that job or doesn't get that job, or has a kid or doesn't have. It's just a continuation of these things. So how can we measure kids by telling them that you're going to follow a path everyone else follows and become something great, where it's such a robotic system? So it's definitely not comparable because everyone's is unique and everyone has unique interests and just unique life. And that's why I love this quote. It's a jack of all trades is a master of none, but the continuation of that quote but is better than a master of one. And I love this so much because we put our foot in everything through homeschooling. We went to every single competition, participated in everything. And that's the beauty of it, because when you try everything, you find out, hey, I'm actually good at this little thing. Home education taught me that my life was a continuation of my choice to home educate, or my decision to continue home educating with my family. And that's because that each life decision depends on that, right? Like you continue to decide things just like it, and it's so beautiful. Even my further education was a continuation of that because it was during COVID, so I was able to still use the skills I learned through learning at home. One very, very important thing is that you just become a natural at lifelong learning. You look at a problem and you're like, you know what, I'm going to figure it out. Like you mentioned earlier, that you never just stop, that I'm not a builder, so I can't do this. Let me learn how, because that's what you're always around people like that. And when I was working, I learned that wow, the term flexibility, my home education journey that people would use against us, like, oh, you're always so flexible, wake up so late or whatever, or you don't have a schedule. It was actually the opposite. I became adaptable. We had teams of people that didn't know how to adapt to any situation or problem. And here I was looking at a problem and I was able to find a solution. I'm like, let's just move on from the problem and not wallow in it and talk about the problem all the time. And here's the journey. Here's everything that it took to get this far. And you might see different things like MUN. I had some internships in there. I was able to be a part of, Jane Goodall's programs. Some of the things that you see are fundraisers I was a part of, the water project in this hospital, that I was able to take a lot of students with me and participate in these things and, just talk and work with the community. Oftentimes society wants us to leave the community and leave your family to do something, but there's a lot that happens within your community, and that's the really beautiful part of it. I would often assume that just because I'm part of my community and I'm doing things for my people around me, that it was too small. But what is too small? Why would I see the world that way? Really, the small stuff gets to the big stuff. So all these things were just kind of things that I was able to take part in, and each aspect, so it's holistic. So some things I learned, some public speaking skills, some things I learned, hands-on skills, but each one that I either did well or did not got me to a point where I can make decisions. I'm confident. I look at a problem and I hope that I take it on with stride. And now I take homeschoolers around the world for educational immersion programs. I'm very happy to do this. It's one of my side projects. And here's one of the recent trips that we did to Uzbekistan. I took 33 people with me, and it's going to grow every couple of months. I'm going to do the same thing. So it's been a journey, and I like to think that this entire process of learning, and even now, like moving forward, it's just a continuation of that decision to home educate. And I want you to hopefully believe in this path and to know that, it's going to look different for you all, but it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be so, so remarkable to look back at, and to think that that little girl who was shy, didn't know that she was smart, can actually do things, and you can too. Thank you so much.
Wow, you are all amazing. Thank you very much for your insights and your comments. I would like to open it now to question and answers. We have about 5 to 10 minutes. So if anybody has a question, we'd like you to come down here to the microphone to your right, my left. Questions? Okay, I will start off. In 1 or 2 words, what would you say would be the best thing about your homeschool journey?
1 or 2 words? Oh, for goodness sake.
So it's a TED Talk, but it's only 1 or 2 words.
I think lifelong learning is probably part of it, yeah. And community, that's 2.
I know it's 3 words, but your family cares. That's what I'd say.
It's great to be different.
Relationship and uniqueness.
It's comfortable.
adaptability, and understanding.
All right, very good. Okay, if you could introduce yourself and where you're from before you ask your question.
Amanda Butler from Texas. And I was curious what your faith journeys were like, or how they were influenced through homeschooling, or if there is a faith component to your homeschooling experiences.
That's a great question. I think faith was one of the biggest components of this journey. We were able to focus so much on the why and really just understand that this is what we do, is what we follow, and then being able to apply it into our lives at such a young age. I think that was so important. Schools often would not do that as well, and they would just cover a certain part of things, whereas at home, my mom did that, and my dad did that. So it was just kind of like a everyday thing. It wasn't like you're going to go to a class, learn about it, and that's it for the day. So we have 5 daily prayers, and so we started our whole timetable around those prayers and then talking about it, and it was always a conversation. It still is. We have certain phrases we use, and it's so important that it sometimes slips when I'm talking to people, and I just share that it's such an important part of my journey, and it will always be. And I think that it was only possible to continue that connection to God and the love and understanding for that through being at home and understanding why we were doing that, and having our mom and dad tell us that and not someone else's narrative on that. So
I would say that so often it feels like religion and everything else is separate. And I think in home education, it allows you to mesh them all together, because I would believe that God is in the midst of everything, that the human condition is underlying history and it's underlying how we live and social studies and all of those things. And being home educated, you get to basically have religion in the midst of every single subject. If it's the core of who you are, then everything else revolves around that. And it's not something that's completely separate.
It was a very big part of our home education journey. Our Christian faith was central, I think, in my parents' decision to home educate me and my 5 siblings. And forming worldview was at the center of our goal as a home educating family, and having open discourse and dialogue so that we could form a strong Christian worldview and not be shaken when we go in the world, and not be afraid of the world, because we've learned to understand why we believe what we believe, and how to have a civil and constructive conversation with someone of a different worldview.
Basically ditto to what's been said. My parents did intentionally determine to pass along their faith to us through our home education. And mostly their faith informed everything that they did, and so that included our home education, and it was passed on to us in that way.
I'd say, like most British home educators, faith played absolutely no part in the reasons for our family to home educate. It's a completely different cultural context in Britain. My parents were both Church of England, so when I was little, I was raised in the Church of England, which has nothing to do with home education. That's just, living family life. From about the age of 7, I was strongly objecting to this, and by the time I was 9, I won the argument. So I am an agnostic. I'm fascinated by religion and religious studies and how different people around the world solve philosophical questions. My sister went on to set up the junior version of the General Synod, so we had a very similar upbringing and different approaches. But the idea that faith and home education are intrinsically linked is just not relevant in the UK context. I think the thing that links us all is it's family life and being raised in your family culture and tradition. Is probably the thing. So if your family has a faith as a strong reason for doing stuff, that's fine. But I just don't want anyone here, especially British people, to think that you have to be religious to home educate, because you don't.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Alicia from Switzerland, and I was wondering if you homeschool your kid, what would be the thing that you would do differently that your parent did?
I'll start. I highly value what my parents did, and I stand on their shoulders. Anything that I do, I know that I'll be building on what they did. We didn't have the requirement to test in Texas, but I think that I would test my children. I think you said that you didn't realize that you were how smart you were until you started getting regular grades. So that's something I would do differently, is test, so that it gives my children the confidence to understand the intelligence that they have.
Something similar. The approach that we took was delightful and wonderful, but I am homeschooling father of 4 children aged 8 through 14, and we are doing some things differently. And part of it is the structure with which we approach certain subjects and testing, because testing can be very helpful just formatively, so you understand, okay, well, we need to focus on this thing a little bit more, but also for the confidence for the student, so that they know that I am doing just fine. Because it was a niggling question until I went and proved myself getting, honors and 2 degrees and whatever else before I finally realized that, okay, I am average, I guess. It always niggled. And so I think that is a great thing. Testing can be actually a very positive thing when done correctly.
So I think that's a really great question. I find what my parents have done to be extremely inspiring. And if I had to do something differently, I would just say travel even more, because I enjoyed it so much. And looking back, I feel like it just offers so much learning to be done through all sorts of areas. So yeah, travel. That's all.
So I'd say it's always lovely to have great ideas about your hypothetical children, because your real ones then turn up, don't they, and have different ideas. So I think my mum and dad and I have discussed this, and we think probably the approach to maths would be different, in that maths, we kind of did workbooks and stuff, and so it made maths seem like a separate topic. So actually, I know it depends on the country you're in and the rules that you have. So like when you're talking about doing more testing, I'm internally going, no, definitely not. That wouldn't be right. So I'm very glad that we did a lot of learning through living and being in the community and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a hard balance. I think you just got to go with the child that's in front of you and not overthink it too much, because, you've got to keep the therapist of the future employed somehow, right? So you've got to have a few mistakes.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
No, it's fine, thanks.
Okay, please.
Hi, my name's Irene, and I'm from Germany. I'm sometimes a little annoyed when people, or not annoyed, it's not that strong, when people measure home educating success with degrees. And what I'd like to hear from some of you is, what do you feel about, if you have a degree and if you've gone that way, was it useful? Some of us, or some home educator, it seems sometimes as a conflict to me, right? We question the traditional school methods, but then we all want to get into university or college. So it's just a question, was it useful? My own kids, I have a couple who say, why am I doing this?
That's a really great question. I grew up with a family that really valued learning, not degree. And because as we know, learning happens outside of the classroom most of the time. You live most of your life outside the classroom. And my parents were supportive of the idea to further educate, but they also said that, for example, for my master's, for 2 years, I've been trying to apply and get into master's and stuff. And and the thing about testing earlier, like the one thing I would do different is to not have that, because that made me do that throughout my life, that if someone doesn't tell me that I'm good enough, then I'm not good enough. Whereas that's not true. You can't wait for someone else to tell you that. Similarly for education, just like we talk about home education, we often stop at high school. And I think it continues throughout your life. So you need to apply those same values and themes to higher education as well, because it's not the same for everyone. And we learned that through COVID. So my mom would often say that, it's be great to have, but you don't need to do it, because, she also was a pioneer for not just doing a degree, just, because there's so much more to life than just getting a piece of paper that tells you you're good at something. So I would say that it's important to have, so all of my learning that I showed, I did not show my diploma because I was like, these are the things that I did that made me who I am, not just an institution. So that would be something that I would think, yeah.
I loved my first degree. Now, our approach was, like you say, degrees, universities, that was not the end all. It was a critical thinking approach to, do I want to do this thing because it has some value or merit? Not, we have to go to university to prove that we're good homeschoolers. So most of my siblings did not go to post-secondary and pursue degrees because it was not important or logical or part of what they desired to do. I loved the great books. I loved classical education. My first degree filled me up. It was learning for learning's own sake. And then it just so happened to give a lot of important and useful skills. My second degree was a utilitarian thing. I wanted to work in home education, ironically. And so I got a teaching degree as an after degree. And it was fine. But I loved my first degree. So sometimes it's important to do it because it's good in itself. And sometimes it's important to do it for a greater good, which is a later job. And sometimes it's important to continue just teaching yourself because you don't need that piece of paper or the recognition from the state to say that you're learning.
Yeah, all of that. It's a great question. So I think it is that separating of, thanks to Dr. Harriet Patterson a few years ago for teaching me the word pedagogy, because I just use it all the time now. It's just a different pedagogy, being in university. And so, yeah, why do you want to go to university? Is it the experience of going to university? Is it the degree? Is it because you love learning? Is it because you like academic study? Is it because you're trying to get a qualification because you want to be a doctor or something and you have to have that piece of paper? So it's like anything in your life, you're deciding, why do I want to do this? What am I trying to get out of it? Do I need to play the game of switching systems, or is it something I want to experience for myself? So I applied for university and got offers, and then I chose not to go because I was already working in the industry that I wanted to work in, and I didn't want to lose all my contacts and then have to start again. I did a little bit of open university study alongside because I've always been interested in that, and then I started working so much that it wasn't worth it. My sister really, and I also felt I didn't need the experience of university because I'd had a whole life of living and learning, and that was fine. My sister did choose to go to university because that's the experience that she wanted. Most of the time now, people just assume I have got a degree, and I have taught masters. And actually, I recently turned down teaching on a master's course because they weren't paying enough. It's just reality. And, I'd love to do a PhD one day because it'd be, an interesting challenge. But yeah, I think it depends on where you are and also what country you're in. Because if I was in Australia or New Zealand wanting to work in media, I probably would have needed the course in order to access the work experience. Whereas in the UK, we have a different culture of the work experience here. So yeah, I think you're right to question it. Know why you're doing it is probably the answer, but it's an individual decision.
Okay, I think we're going to need to end now. We're running out of time. The next session is here in about 6 or 7 minutes. So can we just give them all a round of applause again?